Yeah.
All right. Hello, my friends. This is Spencer Michaud, and I am joined today by my good friend CV Henriette of Art of the Zodiac, and we are going to be talking about the new moon solar eclipse in Gemini. We're going to review a little bit of our experience at Demetra George's recent webinar on the 8th and 12th houses, which is pretty cool. That was done through the Astrology Toronto.
Mhm.
Um, and then we're gonna, take some questions, chat with you in the chat box today, see how you're all doing. So if you are here today, please let us know where you're coming from, how you're doing, and what you're looking forward to with this eclipse season coming up here, this new moon eclipse. So CV, how are you doing?
Good. I'm late. We are late because of me, because I had to take a quick work call because of a confusion. Someone thought that we were meeting today when we're meeting tomorrow. This Mercury retrograde has been a lot.
Yeah,
Lots of
yeah,
issues.
yeah. I had some work stuff this morning too. So I think we're all kind of feeling the. It's Wednesday, Mercury's day, Hermes day, right?
That's
And Mercury is retrograde, causing maybe a little bit of delays in what we're doing here. But that's just how it goes sometimes. Sometimes we have to kind of anticipate that, build in a little extra time, and see where we're heading here. But yeah, what other Mercury retrograde stories have you been experiencing lately?
it's just kind of wild. Like I've been ordering things in the mail, and so like I ordered a gift for somebody, and like it didn't arrive.
Uh oh.
And then like it was delivered to the wrong. It was through Amazon. Apologies, everyone. I know how we feel about Amazon, but whatever. Um, I ordered I ordered a birthday gift, and I ordered it through Amazon so it could arrive on time. And they delivered it to the wrong house. I sent the right address. So I had to call, and it was this thing, and then it ended up getting there. And the same thing happened. Like I ordered a fan, but then as soon as I ordered it, it said it was going to be like a month later somehow. So I had to order another one. And then when I did cancel the second one, but it came anyway, but delayed. It's been all of these like just like logistical issues. Like yesterday, this is my last one. I had to like deal with this court thing in not even here, like in Paris. It's this sort of mess up thing. It's about a dead relative. It's a long, drawn out thing.
Sure, sure.
I was on a deadline, and I had to get this paper fax, and I had to actually print it out and fill out this form. And so what? Like Monday night, I went to do it, and my printer broke, just inexplicably. Printer broke. Okay, so
Oh.
whatever. It's annoying. The next day, I was like, fine, I'll go to the printer, like Kinko's by my house, whatever. Swear to goodness, I get there. I'm like so short for time, and there's a giant like sign. It's like 3 p.m. said location closed due to emergency.
Wow.
So I had to like travel like an hour out of my way to do this. Anyway,
Yeah, yeah. And if you're listening in, tell us if you have any Mercury retrograde stories right now. Right now, my cat is playing the role of Hermes. In the background here, you can see Gandalf here is being a little bit of a trickster. I'm gonna have to keep an eye on him. Usually, he's not allowed in the office because there are plants here that he's not supposed to eat. But this is par for the course, and he just wants to be where I'm at. And I'm keeping the door open today because it's like 90 degrees here in Michigan, and I'm on the second story of an old house and trying to keep some airflow going. But I'm seeing Tarja is here in the chat joining us from Finland. So welcome, Tarja. Glad to have you here.
I love our
And
Finland friends.
if there are other people out there in virtual land, please tell us where you're coming from and what's going on with you. Um, Interesting. One little thing that popped up, just to
Yeah.
bring it full circle with the astrology. One of the things that I've been talking about with a few other astrologers after attending the Northwest Astrology Conference
Yep.
and talking about Ben Dyke's talk with solar returns.
Okay.
And one of the things that I was taking away from his talk was, that a planet in your natal chart, regardless of where it is in your solar return, is always going to kind of be drawing upon similar house topics, right? And I thought it was fascinating. The thought that came up when you were thinking about this was um, Mercury is placed in what house for you,
The eighth.
right? The house of.
Death.
There you go. So you had to, when Mercury was retrograding, you
Mm-hmm.
had to deal with an issue. that was had to do with death and with like maybe some kind of thing with resources of others and something of that nature. So you had something that was coming and reviewing based on where that planet was in your chart. And I think that's a really cool thing to play with your charts there at home, because I think that that's something I'm really starting to focus on, is that planet is always going to be bringing those topics from the natal chart, and it's really, yes, it may be colored in a certain different way, but it's always going to be funneling back to that particular planet. And I think that was one of the really big takeaways I took from Ben's talk.
I'm going to just sort of add to that and say that when I think of like, because I just, well, during this season, I had my nodal return. My nodes are natally in the Gemini Sagittarius axis. Um, and I noticed that my nodal return story, from what I can piece together, what it seems to be, is there's a lot of death connected to it. So even like my nodal return, right, is connected to that eighth house Mercury. So to further like that, it would be curious. I'd be curious for people to look at their nodal story and to see how that plays in. Or sorry, that wouldn't fit. That wouldn't matter. I'm Gemini related, so
Well, you have
I
the
just mixed
eclipse
up.
is activating your nodes because
Yes,
you,
not everyone.
yeah, we'll break that down too, because eclipses happen near the north or the south node. So we'll have to bring that into our story here. I'm seeing a few more chats and or comments in the chat box.
Ooh, ooh.
Hello, Aaron. Aaron says hi from Iowa. Demetra's workshop last weekend was great. Yeah, it definitely was. It was CV and I were kind of texting and having our minds blown throughout the whole
Yeah.
throughout the whole weekend. And she did if for those of you who aren't familiar, Demetra George just did a deep dive through Astrology Toronto, um, which is a great organization. We have some friends that we studied with that are part of their board. Um, and she did a deep dive on the 8th and the 12th house, and which is interesting because those houses are really difficult ones to speak with clients, because there's a lot of in the tradition, there's a lot of challenging topics that come up, especially topics like death with the eighth house, and potentially feelings of isolation and imprisonment, or things like self-undoing with the 12th house. So it was I really enjoyed my time. I will say, doing Norwalk and that back to back was an endurance test, as far as like being in front of the screens for multiple hours a day. But Demetra is such a wonderful, masterful teacher that she's just getting a direct download from her was really wonderful, and being able to, benefit from the accumulated um, study that she's been doing for decades now, or for a full Saturn return, as she likes to say, for these books that she has coming out. Um, pretty awesome stuff. What were some of your thoughts, CV? What was your experience like?
Well, I'll start with the fact that I had a lot of work to do, and when you were like, "Hey, let's you know, attend 16 hours of lectures this weekend," I somehow jumped at it and I was like, "Oh man, what did I get myself into?" But it was absolutely like totally worth it. Yeah, you're right. Just to add to what you're saying, she has so much knowledge, right? Like I feel like I just had a really good download for these two houses. Um, Two other things. One, it's interesting because I have Mercury in the eighth and you have some 12th. If you, I can
I
say your
have Mercury in the 12th,
yeah.
so
And
we have Mercury activating these houses. Yeah.
so it's interesting to be able to like have this conversation with you. And I feel like through you sharing your 12th house experience, like while I was listening to that lecture, it was really like creating a full picture for me. And then also just like everybody like in that chat was just really knowledgeable. Like it's so lovely when when you attend a lecture, but then everyone else there is just like on it.
Yeah.
That's just like the greatest.
Yeah, we have a lot of really intelligent and you know, I don't know, talented people in the astrological community that have lots of wonderful contributions to add to the conversation. And I enjoy learning from them and getting to hear their stories. And, one thing I think that is important to recognize is that everyone's going to have little niches here and there of things that they've studied and things that they are passionate about. Because astrology, it's not a monolith, right? There's just so many different entry points to it, and it's really great to see get those alternate perspectives and really learn from them as well. I'm seeing that the Dimfy is joining us from the Netherlands. Nice to be here. Greetings from the Netherlands. Very cool. Aaron says, I only did Sunday. Gemini is my ninth, and so much else going on. I really enjoyed listening to Demetra, though, as I knew I would. Yeah, one of the things that I noticed, it's Demetra is like in her mid 70s, right?
Or,
And the
or
stamina, the intellectual and probably physical stamina for
yeah,
speaking for that long was incredible. I think she's a Leo ascendant like us, so I think that I don't know if you have that type of sustained energy over time, but man, she was just going and going and going, and just I was like, oh man, at the end of it when people were asking questions, I was like, man, let's let this let's let this lady rest a little bit, you know. But
you,
I'm bad. I ask all the questions too.
oh no, maybe that's something to be brought up though, because I have some friends her age. One in particular, I'm thinking about, who has like a Leo ascendant, and like it's astounding how much more energy I think they have than maybe even me. Um,
Well, hopefully when we get to that life stage, we will be like just channeling mana from the universe, right? And or prana, prana, mana, whatever it is. Just that spiritual energy. It's a shift, right, from physical energy to being fueled by maybe more spiritual energy, or having to marshal your energy in a different way. I think that what I've noticed with aging is I just have to have short bursts and then rest and things like that.
yeah,
Even as we get into our 40s here, it's a little different than the Demetrius situation, but definitely there's always different life stages that you're going through. Lisa is here. Lisa here listening while I work. And whistling. Are you whistling while you work, Lisa? I just added that. You said listening while you work, and it made me think that you might be whistling as well. Um, it's great to have you here. Yeah, if you're just joining us, we're talking a little bit about Demetra George's webinar that we both attended through Astrology Toronto. There's just a lot of educational opportunities out there. Just to give Demetra a plug, she has a second book in her series, Ancient Astrology in Theory and Practice, that is coming out and is available for pre-order right now through the Rubedo Press website. So if you look up Rubedo Press, they are out of New Zealand. I believe that the gentleman that runs that, his name is Aaron Cheek. Very knowledgeable person, great writer too. His writing reminds me a lot of Austin Kopic's writing. I believe that they are friends. And it's available for pre-order. And she also has a Hellenistic course coming up too that is through, I think, Astrology University.
ooh,
So I want to, plug Demetra's work because she's been such a huge influence in my own work, especially with like her book, Astrology and the Authentic Self, um, basically sending me down this path of traditional astrology and then just learning from her at workshops, conferences, talks, and whatnot. So one of the true masters and really just genuinely nice people in this area of study. So she is someone who is really, really good at teaching a complicated thing in a simple way where you can actually um, do exercises to become better at it. She's really good at like saying, okay, here's the concept. Now here's how to put it into practice. Here's how to put it into use. And I really, all my Virgo placements are really excited about that approach.
my my Mercury in Pisces that needs all the help he can get is really happy about that approach.
Yeah.
Um, Last thing I just want to say about her, like sort of adding to that, I need to find a new way to say adding to that. By the way, that phrase. Okay. Um, did you just? Every time I should know this already, but every time I hear a lecture with her from her, especially this one, I'm just almost surprised. And it's so delightful the way that she's able to like synthesize an entire life's worth of astrological study into a practice, because she often takes from like schools of thought that aren't necessarily traditional, even though she is a master in traditional. Like I'm just so fascinated how she'll bring in sort of other modalities in just such a seamless and like eloquent way. I don't know if your thoughts on that.
Oh yeah, totally. She's one of the things she's known for too is like the asteroids and things of that nature, which is something that she became one of the, I guess, foremost experts on in the decades leading up to the traditional revival as well. And yeah, Demetra, she takes people on trips around the world to these sacred ancient sites. Um, yeah, I would love to do something like that. She was, before the pandemic hit, she was taking people to Greece and all of these wonderful historic sites, and that would be a really cool trip to get that kind of direct transmission as well. I guess it just goes to show that if you put the work in over time, there are good things that can come from a lifetime of study. And I think that is one of her gifts, is she just continued to work over time and build a practice, or build a research type of approach. Her story is interesting too, because she went back and got a degree in classics and learned ancient Greek, and I believe she probably learned Latin or something like that, so she can translate these texts. And the most important thing in her story is that when Project Hindsight came around, Demetra was like 50 years old, and her entire um, astrological worldview was thrown into question, to the point where she has said she stopped giving readings completely, because she's like, this is a whole new system, it's whole new information, and it's throwing into question everything that I've done. And she, at 50 years old, said, I'm going to completely relearn this tradition, and have the flexibility of mind and the willingness to be a late stage apprentice, right? To completely shift what she was doing. And I have so much respect for that, because it's very easy for people to get fixated on their method and not change. And I've seen that even in the astrological community, where I've heard some very prominent astrologers on some podcasts say, I would love to study traditional astrology, but I just don't have time. I'm too busy cashing checks and like doing readings and things like that. And at least that's what it felt like they were saying to me. And I hope to always retain that flexibility of mind, I guess. So good for you, Demetra, on that, right?
Well, I think, I don't know, like maybe this is kind of veering off, but I feel so lucky that I started studying astrology. Like I started studying traditional from the very beginning. But what I think Demetra maybe did is that, like, understanding that to study it traditional is really just to go back to the source,
Right.
right? Like, so, and someone like her is very interesting because there are some sort of modern techniques she sort of puts back in, but she really took the time to get to know the craft. So yeah, I don't understand people being like, I don't have time to study that. It's like, you don't have time to study the thing that earned you a living.
Yeah. Yeah. And to me too, and I can understand if people have built a practice and built a business and things like that, but it always comes back to essence and intention for me. Like, part of the reason I pulled back a little bit from doing as much um, content creation was that I felt like I needed to learn more. I had taken what I had learned to its logical, not ending point, but to as far as I could take it, doing what I was doing. And I really wanted to re-engage and free up some time to pursue something that um, would light my spark. And when I feel like us Leo ascendants, CV, when we're excited about something, we can sell that idea to anybody or share that idea with anybody. But when we're not excited about it, it's just like, we're like pouty pants, like, so I wanted to feel that, like, that yes, this is amazing, I love this, and you should love this too. I'm great and you're great, that Leo thing that we were talking about before. But I think it's more the idea that's great, and say, okay, I love this idea, that
Mhm.
I really want to be able to share it. I see we're being joined by Aligning Light Astrology. Now I know who that is. I've said the last live stream, forgot who that was. That's my new friend, Dr. Claire Moon, who all of you should check out on Instagram and on their website and whatnot. A great astrologer who does some office hours on Tuesday evenings at 7 o'clock Eastern time, or 6 Central, I think. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Claire. But an intelligent voice added to the conversation here. So welcome.
Well, what are office hours?
Office hours. Well, Claire should tell us what office hours is. But basically, it's like a Instagram live where she will get on and then, you know, do questions and answers and things like that. And I
Like
really
office
like,
hours.
yeah, exactly. I really like their approach. And um, yeah, really, really intelligent voice added to the conversation, and a fellow Midwesterner like us. So glad to have you here, Claire. All right. So did we do enough of a dive on Demetra's stuff? You
Yeah.
think?
Okay.
Any other takeaways?
Yeah. What I'm going to ask you.
Okay.
So, someone with 12th house placements,
Yeah.
what was like, did you have like an aha moment takeaway from that lecture? And what was it?
Um, I will preface that by saying that this was not my first Demetra George lecture. And in the past, I have had many aha
Oh, I
moments
can't hear
with.
you.
Oh, hello? Can you hear me now? You still there? Are we getting retrograded?
We're getting retrograded. So weird. I can hear you now.
You can hear me now? Okay. I will just, I was saying that I've attended a lot of Demetra's lectures at various conferences and things like that.
Yeah.
And uh, every time I see her speak, I definitely was getting the light bulb moments. And I think with this one, there was some things that I've heard her speak about before. But one of the things I really resonated with, she's talking about the 12th house in general and talking about the ascent of the soul, through the different planetary spheres. Like the soul will come down through the planetary spheres to be incarnated into a body, and when it leaves the body, it needs to go back through those spheres and release the things that it has accumulated on this physical plane.
Yeah.
And what Demetra did that I thought was so brilliant, she went through the different planetary spheres and talked about the types of things that need to be released. And this was also echoed in the Hermetica. The Corpus Hermeticum is where this is talked about. So, like, for example, the moon, you need to release like inconstancy. So this is like if you have a planet in the 12th house, maybe this is something that would be contributing to a feeling of self-undoing or a feeling of hardship, or where that planet might not be functioning as well as it would want to. So like if you have the moon in the 12th, it might be that you need to learn some consistency or something like that. Mercury, it's releasing, like, maybe manipulating or not being honest. The sun could be arrogance or something of that nature. Jupiter, I think, was greed. And Saturn, what was Saturn? I don't know. You were at the talk too, but each planet had one of the 7 deadly sins was something they connected it with too, that they were working through. So that concept is ripe for exploration. The way that I like to think about it too, instead of just being a sin potentially, because I know that that's a loaded language as far as like not everybody is practicing a certain religious tradition. And astrology is not necessarily, you don't have to practice a religion necessarily to be a good astrologer. Um, I think that for me, Saturn being the joy, right, in the 12th house, or Saturn's joy being in the 12th,
Mm-hmm.
one way that I've been approaching Saturn is seeing it as a planet of contraction to bring equilibrium, to be able to like bring things back into harmony and back into balance, because it is that planet of nemesis that is restoring right proportion, and it's exalted in Libra. So I really think that those 12th house placements, it's the humbling of Saturn. So those planets, that they are being Saturned, okay. And I've gone through this. I have a sun and Mercury in the 12th house, and I've definitely had circumstances in my life where I had a humbling. Like, here's an example: Mercury in the 12th.
Yeah.
I used to, when I was really young, I just would say whatever would come into my head.
Yeah.
And my dad was always like, Spencer, you got to think before you speak. Think before you speak. Like he would really drill that into my head. Like, really consider how what you're saying is going to affect other people. And almost to the point where it created like a somewhat of a complex that I've had to overcome on some level. But I think that what that has given me is the ability to really consider how my words are going to have an emotional effect on other people. And by bringing that into harmony, by slowing down the delivery of my speech, I'm able to consider before I say it whether it's going to hurt someone's feelings or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, he was literally like reining in your Mercury. Your father was sort of acting like that Saturn character.
Totally.
Saturn being the father, right, too. So
Yeah.
that's a
And
really interesting manifestation of that.
I'm seeing some chats coming in.
Yeah.
Lisa is talking back about something we were talking about with knowledge being calcified, and we don't want to get too calcified. We want to stay flexible. I agree.
Like,
Claire is saying respect for sure for Demetra and being able to learn at a more advanced age. She's saying that their office hours are 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Okay, so it's Mercury retrograde. We got to get that time right. 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern. Pop by to nerd out about astrology and ask me questions. Thanks for the shout out. I've always wondered about the 7 deadly sins and the planets. Demetra for the win. Lisa says 12th house planets are subject to the rule of Saturn in a way. It makes so much sense. Yeah, that was a really huge aha moment, as far as my own 12th house placements, because I have the sun there too. And there are definitely some times where I've been humiliated, like I would say, humbled is the word, but it was easy for me in my youth sometimes to get. It was a sway, right? It's the sway of like extreme self-confidence versus a lack of confidence. And I think planets in those cadent houses are a little bit unstable like that. And I've swung back and forth between some really ugly arrogance to just not believing in myself type of thing. And that's 12th house type of experience too. And I've had to learn as I age to moderate that swing, right? That's that emotional swing, and become more consistent with things as well. I guess one final thing I'll say about that, CB, and then I'd like to hear your feedback on that, is since the sun is my ascendant ruler, having it placed in the 12th house can make it a little bit difficult to figure out like who you are, right? When you have the helm in
yeah.
inversion, when it's not witnessing the ascendant, it can feel like your life is pulling you off track consistently. And I remember Demetra talked about the loss of one or both parents with having the lights in the 12th house. And, my parents divorced when I was very young, 2 years old, and my dad moved away for a period of time. And then I went to live with my dad, and my mom like left for a period of time. So I've lost both parents at various points of my life, not in the same way that you did. You have some interesting things with like having fourth house stuff, right? With your parents. I don't know how much you want to go into that. You don't have to. I'm sorry to bring it up if it's a
oh,
private
no, no.
thing, but
Not talk about anything.
yeah, it's kind of this, it's just interesting to see how it both plays out physically and mentally, right? Into the inner and the outer, as above, so below, as within, so without. So I toss it back to you.
First thing I want to get out of the way. When I was looking at my phone, I was looking for the 7 deadly sins slide. I could not
Yeah.
find it.
Oh,
But we keep everyone updated.
yeah. Maybe I'll look for it.
And I was following Dr. Moon on Instagram. Dr.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's interesting because like I'll kind of talk maybe about a similar. It's interesting to think about how people on the surface can have like similar experiences, but how when you look at the chart, you start to see the different ways that maybe this experience is both manifest in that person's life, and then how they are interpreted by the owner of the chart. So I have I think my most definitely my most debilitated planet is Mercury in Pisces in the 8th, right? I don't have any planets in the 12th. And it's interesting because you mentioned that like I have my sun in Aries in the 9th, my moon's in Gemini, but like I had a similar, like growing up, but both my parents, like at a very young age, my parents split. My mother left for a time, my father left for a time. My father ended up dying on my Saturn return. But it's interesting when I think about like how they play out in my chart. in some ways, like I definitely see my Saturn as my father, and I see my mother Moon in different ways, um, in Gemini. But in some ways, like my experience of that part of my life is very much, I think, embedded in that Mercury. I
Yeah.
think about like I grew up with a father who was a Vietnam vet,
Mm.
really traumatized. My grandmother, like, you know, survived Paris World War II, Jew. Um, I just grew up with all these really heavy, like, stories of war and just trauma. And I just grew up with a lot of just like a lot of just emotionally, like my parents themselves drank a lot when I was growing up, like a lot, and there was a lot of just emotional heaviness, and then
Yeah.
also sort of generational. And so it's interesting to think that, like, for me, the way that it sort of, I feel like all of that is embedded in my eighth house. I feel there's just
Yeah.
sort of this lineage of that for me has always been in my chart. The one thing that I always, it feels like a sticking point. It's like the one thing part of my chart that I always have to confront, no matter
Yeah.
how good everything is. And I wonder if in some ways your 12th house placement feels like that. Like things in the rest of the chart can be happening, but it somehow always attracts to that 12th house lens somehow.
Yeah. Um, well, first of all, yes, I can confirm that. I did find the slide that we were in question.
Okay, cool.
So this is from the Corpus Hermeticum, though. This is not the seven deadly sins. This is what is being released as you pass, as the soul passes through the seven celestial spheres. So in ancient times, they thought that the earth was the center of spheres that surrounded the earth, and that the soul would pass up through these seven celestial spheres and release something that it had gained in its earthly incarnation. So the moon, it was said to be increase and decrease. Mercury was evil machination. Venus, illusion of longing and desire. The sun, arrogance. Mars, unholy presumption and daring recklessness. And Jupiter, evil impulses that come from wealth. And then Saturn, deceit that lies in ambush. So those are fascinating things from the Corpus Hermeticum, right? So inconstancy with the moon, you know, playing tricks on people or trying to manipulate people with Mercury potentially. Venus, like overly desiring things because Venus is that planet of love, desiring. And of course, the sun is like is the king and that pride, arrogance. Um, Daring recklessness, though, Mars speeds things up, right? Mars is trying to get us to that, take unnecessary risks potentially. And then Jupiter is like that greed, like for wealth. And then Saturn, deceit that lies in ambush. That's an interesting one,
That makes me think of hidden enemies, right? Because the 12th house, we say hidden enemies.
right?
Like, see if they're lying in ambush, you can't see them. They're just going to come out at
Yeah.
you.
And so we have someone else joining us today. Cloverfield Constellations, Astrology and Tarot says, "Hello, beautiful people. Hello to you, Cloverfield. Um, if you want to tell us what your name is, we can call you by name, or we can just use your moniker, business moniker here." I wanted to comment on your eighth house placements because they're one of the things that really stood out to me in Demetra's talk about the eighth house was a communication with the dead. And I recently, excuse me, I recently had a client who had a prominent eighth house luminary, and I had asked them about, do you speak with the dead? And they were like, yep. And then proceeded to give me a very interesting, accurate description of the spirits that were surrounding me at the time, and gave me some information that would not have been known pretty much by anyone else than the person that they claimed was in the room with me. And I thought that was like really fascinating, really interesting, and something to consider if you're reading charts and you see somebody with a really prominent eighth house placement, to see if that is part of their experience. That kind of like, I don't know, seance, or what is the word we could talk about, mediumship, or what is the
Channeling.
word, channeling, whatever, necromancy, was that the communication with the dead, right? Do you have experiences like that with your Mercury there?
Yeah, but it's not like as dramatic and like exciting, but it's definitely like real, I think. So for instance, like going back to my nodal return story about I have one aunt that I was really close to. She lived in Paris. She she died like right before I couldn't visit her before she died. Anyway, so um, an example of this, I always have like really weird dreams. Like I remember like when I was younger, I'm gonna backtrack. I remember like when I was like, I don't know, 12, I had this great dream. My grandfather died, and like the next morning, my father was like, "Oh, your grandfather's not gonna make it because he's in the hospital." Just weird things like that. But then also like, so in my is my aunt. I changed my name. My middle name's Vivian, and I actually named myself, took the name from Vivian Haywood, who's T.S. Eliot's first wife. I feel this a very close connection with her. At any rate, I've told you the story already. I just found out in the last week that my aunt, the one who died, uh, she we never knew her middle name for whatever reason. My mother didn't think of it, but we have the exact. Her middle name is Vivian, so I sort of unconsciously took her middle name, and she's the one that I've been having to do all these. It's something around her death, so I had to do these papers with her, and by yesterday, this like Mercury trip up, it was like forcing me to think about her. So I feel there in these some ways, I feel like I get these like really meaningful connections somehow to the dead, being like, remember me, do this thing about me, um, and that feels very significant. Or like I now share a name with this woman,
Yeah.
but it's not like, yeah, I don't have that or even like I don't have the experience of like voices, which I know people have that experience, and I have to say I'm really envious.
Yeah, I've never had. I don't know if I've had too many paranormal type experiences. My cat is inserting himself into the conversation here. This is Gandalf, everyone. If you can see him behind me, his brother Radagast is probably somewhere sleeping, but we'll see. Um, yeah, I've had some. I would say that 12th house knowing versus 8th house knowing is different. So Demetra talked a lot about Edgar Casey with 8th house placements. And yeah, I don't hear voices. I've not really seen spirits or ghosts or things like that. But I think that with a 12th house placement, she was talking about tapping into a collective unconscious. And I think that I definitely do that a lot. Like I kind of have been in the past of somehow stumbled into the zeitgeist of what the community may be feeling, and I can feel that, and I will get thoughts on that. So I think it's a different type of intuition, where instead of maybe a direct contact with like a spirit, an individual in the spirit world, it's like you're tapping into this ocean of consciousness with the 12th house, and it's a very different weird thing. I will say that one of the results of that is that when the collective is suffering, I really feel it, and it's really overwhelming sometimes. Like when there is civil unrest, it wears on me quite a bit. And I wonder if people in the chat have had that type of 12th house experience. Lisa says maybe the 12th house native will experience the opposite. For example, you can't get away with this particular sin. Saturn brings karma to you quickly if you do. I think that that could definitely be a part of the conversation, right? Like Saturn is going to punish if you commit that particular transgression. But I think that the punishment is a loaded word that we want to, that we have difficulty with sometimes. But I think Saturn's ultimate goal is homeostasis or equilibrium. So it's that contraction or that punishment that brings things back into balance. So I think that on that regard, Lisa, definitely you're on the right track. Um, Aligning Light says, Lisa, that's interesting. I'm going to keep thinking on that. I sort of do feel like that with my 12th house party. Yeah, Claire has some prominent 12th house placements too, and was confirming some of our um, thoughts on the 12th house. What do you think, CV?
I just think it's funny. I For a while in readings, I kept getting people with 12th house placements, and it was so interesting to me how like most of them had like some sort of, you're right, they had like this really deep tie to the collective, whether a lot of them were spiritual practitioners, whether like they were healers or tarot readers or something like this. But I've also experienced people who had this sort of literal transformation of it, like they were literally they had like been in jail or in some sort of institution when they were younger, and then through that experience it had like shaped their entire life. um like I've seen that sort of play out, and but definitely, yeah, this connection to the collective. um and I'm wondering if yours is like just a more, even more, I would say, like richer, I don't know if that's the word, porous experience because it is Cancer, right? That so feeling like maybe you're really like tied into those sort of that emotional body of the collective.
Certainly feels that way. I think that one interesting mitigation or something that is helping my 12th house experience is that I have an exalted moon on the midheaven, and that's ruling all of those planets in the 12th house. So it's kind of like I can't help but make those experiences public experiences. And I think that's what I'm doing on this channel a little bit, is just tapping into some of that collective through examining omens, examining symbols, and talking about it, and hopefully bringing value to people through sharing my experiences, sharing my insights, or things of that nature. And I think that one of the things that, just to tie a bow on this, as far as what Demetra was talking about how to deal with planets in that house, I love the story that she talks about the energy of a bodhisattva, where you experience suffering so that you can help alleviate and learn compassion for others. And I've experienced more than my fair share of suffering. I don't talk publicly about everything that has gone on in my private life, but I've gone through some stuff, like as every 12th house person can probably attest. But I think that one of the things I really strive to do is to turn those challenges into teachable moments, and to try to uh, help other people through just knowing maybe what someone is going through, and saying, I'm going to hold space for you, and I'm going to, I don't know exactly your experience, and it may take a different form than what mine does, but the essence of our suffering is we can relate on that level. And I think that's a great way to deal with the 12th house, is to think about how you can utilize that experience and maybe choose to overcome it, and to share, and to have compassion for people, because it really is a choice. Some 12th house people can be the worst examples of human beings in the world if they are allowing the bad daimon, to overwhelm them. Whereas some of the 12th house people can be some of the most enlightened and, like, helpful people in the world, because they're choosing to use whatever that experience is to be able to move forward and to help other people. I've got to make sure Gandalf isn't eating this poisonous plant behind me. Sorry.
Do you know, oh, why can't I think of his name right now? Damien, you wrote a book on magic.
Mm.
Why is this so hard for me? He was, let me look this up because I always equate this story with the 12th house. Damien Eccles? Am I getting that right? So bad with names. I'm on my computer. I'm still going to look this up this way.
What is the book?
So essentially, he's written a couple books. He's written books on like magic. Yeah, Damien Eccles. That's right. When he was like, I don't know, like 19, I think, he was sentenced to jail for life. Yeah, it was for life. Because he was accused of killing, I think he was like three young boys or something. It was just really horrible. Um, but God, he was in jail for like 18 years or something crazy like this before they finally, he was released because they had no evidence. He was, sorry, my dog is making noises. Anyway, so he was released from jail. It was this false thing, whatever. Not whatever, it's a huge story. But his whole thing is, sorry, there's a Pomeranian yapping. Can you hear me, by the way? You were getting kind of glowy for a minute.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, cool. So anyway.
This is the animal edition of the live stream.
I know. Oh my God, the Pomeranian barking from her crate. Okay. So anyways, Damien Eccles goes away like 19 years old, right? So this is like about like what? This is the first nodal return, right? 19? Yeah. Okay, approximately. Anyway, sentenced to jail for life. And he gets in there, and this sort of older inmate says to him, like, listen, you're here and you have two choices. You can either treat this like a prison and lose your mind, just go crazy because you realize you're in prison.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can treat this like your monastery and go inward and live your life. And that's what he did. So he spent the next 18 years becoming like a Zen priest, just studying magic intensely. And so he ended up like getting married while he was still in prison, and his wife was a videographer, and they made this documentary and she helped get him out. And then now it's like he's written books on magic, but that's exactly what, to me, that feels like the 12th house, that moment.
Yes. I love that you are pointing out this train of thought, because this was another thing that Demetra was highlighting and spotlighting too, is that another expression of the 12th house is kind of the intellectual in the ivory tower, or the mystic that is like accepting being in that place of exile, or in like an ashram or something of that nature. And I think that that's a yeah, I think that's another great way to approach planets in that house, is being able to say, this is part of what my life experience is going to be. And through my acceptance, I'm going to be able to grow within this condition of my life. One of the things I was talking about with a student today, I do some private tutoring. Um, I always like to say the chart gives you the problem and the solution. And I was like, I don't know why other astrologers don't say that. Maybe they do, but she was like, well, that's what you need to say. That should be what you say then. I was like, okay. So, but that means though that when we come into alignment with what the chart is saying we are going to experience, rather than resisting it, rather than trying to paddle upstream, we can work with the resources that we have to make the best of that situation. And I think that the way you make the best of a 12th house situation is through meditation, retreat, spiritual learning, transcendence, and things like that. That's not to discount the very real suffering that people experience there. Okay. But you, like I said, one other thing I like to say to my family and to people on this channel is, you can't avoid pain. But I think that we can choose whether we are going to continue to suffer through resistance or acceptance.
Absolutely.
A couple chats coming in. Aaron was confirming Eccles was your author. They say that he is an interesting character. He was into Wicca at one point, then the Golden Dawn, and got really into tarot. Yeah, Golden Dawn really had a lot of interesting influences on the Rider-Waite Tarot for sure, Aaron. Sixth house. Lisa says sixth house wants in on the convo. Well, Demetra didn't go over the sixth house very much in that webinar, so we'll have to see. Kelsey is here.
Catch her sixth house webinar at NORWAC. I haven't seen it yet.
Oh yeah. She did do a sixth house thing. Well, we'll have to get there. We need to get to the eclipse too today too. But Kelsey Bates is here. Hello, Kelsey. Says Eccles is the fishbowl man on Midnight Gospel. Oh yeah, that's a really interesting show, isn't it? With what's his name? The psychedelic explorer. Oh boy, Duncan Trussell is his name. He has a lot of interesting thoughts on experimental, like psychedelic journeying. Okay. And that is a show about, it's a cartoon sort of about him just like rambling on about his LSD experiences and stuff. It's cool though. There's a lot of interesting thoughts in there. Tarya says natural forces, cats and dogs. Yes, that's what we're experiencing. Susanna is here from Finland. So we have two more Finland people here. Hi, everyone. I almost missed this. And Lisa is saying hi to Susanna. All right, CV. So are we? Do we have was that a pretty good deep dive into Demetra's work and a 12th house exploration here? Any final thoughts that you have with this?
No, I just think that again, the biggest takeaway was kind of reiterating. You know what? I'm going to say the biggest takeaway from the conversation has been your tagline, right? So the chart will show us the problem and the solution. Again, like it feels like from your 12th house experience, that's something you've had to learn to lean into. And I feel like I know it's the same for my 8th. So I think that's a sort of upbeat way to leave it, right? Like just because you have these planets, if you're listening to this, you're probably an adult. So you've already experienced the pain. It's just learning how to, find some acceptance and
Stoicism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Deborah is here. Hello, Deborah. She says, hello, Spencer and CV. It's good to see you here, Deborah. Deborah was, I think, at Norwalk recently, too. So have had some nice conversations with her recently. So, yes, agree 100%. Problem and the solution. Also, just a final thought on that is everyone's got something,
Yeah.
and not everyone is going to manifest the most positive manifestation of every type of human experience. And I think we have some strengths and we have some weaknesses. We have some things that flow really smoothly in our life, which we can lean into for support. And we
Mm-hmm.
have some things that are more challenging that we may have to put extra energy into to be able to bring into balance and into equilibrium. All right, CV, let's go on to this new moon solar eclipse.
Woo!
So I'm going to bring up the chart of this eclipse and we will take a look at it here. So here is our eclipse that is happening tomorrow, Thursday, June the 10th at 6:52 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, sorry. And we are seeing this eclipse happen at 19 degrees of Gemini. A new moon solar eclipse is where we have the sun and the moon coming together in the same sign, and eclipses do happen within a certain distance of one of the nodes, and in this case it is the north node, a point of increase, or a hungry dragon that has its head severed from its body. So you could think of it in a couple of different ways, right? We were talking about last time we were together, we were talking about dragon fertilizer, right? Like, I don't know if that was on this channel or some other channel. We talk a lot.
ID, I think it was, where was that? It was so good. No, I think it was on this channel.
Yeah. So we were talking about the last eclipse that we had, the full moon eclipse, where that was during the astrology of June. So if you haven't checked out the astrology of June, we talk about dragon fertilizer, which was sort of our funny way of describing the south node of the moon. And in that case, it was in Sagittarius, where we were coming to some kind of fruiting, some fruition, where energy was leaving. And in this case, it was Jupiter type energy. So maybe something surrounding our beliefs and the way that we organize our world and the way that we order our worlds. So if you're coming to this, I want you to think back on that full moon eclipse as to where the energy in the Sagittarius ruled area of your chart may have been leaving your life. And maybe if there was a requirement to release some intensity surrounding some of your beliefs. And I say intensity because the south node was on the fixed star Antares, which is the heart of the Scorpion. Okay. And some of the downfalls of Antares is we can be a little bit too intense. We can, put things out there a little bit too heavily. You have I believe you have Jupiter on Antares, don't you, CV? So like you probably had to learn this lesson on some level. Although your intensity probably brings you benefit sometimes with Jupiter being there, I would imagine.
Yeah, but it can also just, I have the pitfall of like losing myself in a project, right? And I feel like that's an intensity where you believe so much you lose yourself.
Totally.
But yes.
And now this eclipse that we are experiencing, roughly about 2 weeks later, we've been in the middle of like what your other teacher, Adam Summer, calls the dragon hole, right? Or the dragon cave. Do you have ways that he has described that?
It's funny. I'm sharing this in the chat. I just wrote on, I quoted him. I read his blog for Supernatural Lingerie, and I just wrote something about like the books in general. So if you want to hear my ramblings, so you don't mind sharing that in the chat.
Sure.
I mentioned that because in it I discuss it's the whole piece is essentially that, like, I think that what's different about the eclipses when we're talking about the dragon hole, and I really get this from Adam as well, is that, I mean, think about it, like they're points in the sky, but like you can't see them, right? Like they're literally imaginary. Like we see them on a chart, the sun is out there. These nodes aren't actually anywhere. And so I think like when like during eclipse season, it's far more like it feels like this like maybe like the dragon of fate, where you don't quite know what he's going to deliver up to you, and you don't quite know what has been delivered until like 6 months later, until you look there and you're like, what happened? Oh, that's where it started.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Like it just feels like that's when I think of the dragon hole. I think of this sort of time where you're like at the mercy of some sort of mythical creature.
Yeah. It is it's I keep coming back to the word wild card, but yes, I mean, think about how the ancients would think about eclipses, where, basically the forces of life, the sun and the moon that were giving vitality and energy and spiritual essence, they literally thought of these things as deities or gods, were being swallowed up by darkness. And how scary that must have been based on that particular worldview. So this is something where something is getting kind of shut off or swallowed up, and it's it's an unsettling and destabilizing time where everything is kind of, shaken up, and we're shuffling the deck for the new chapter that is going to be given to us, and the new set of circumstances that's going to be given to us. So if everybody's been feeling a little unstable or destabilized for the last 2 weeks, it's because we've been in that in between eclipse periods, the Bardo period, the liminal space, the dragon hole, or whatever, where there's a dangerous creature that lives there, So, um, also, just, FYI, eclipses were thought of as malefic events.
Yeah.
So there are these warnings. If you're into like crystals and charging them at the moons and things like that, don't charge your crystals at an eclipse, because you're infusing this destabilized energy into your physical, almost like talismans, basically. It's not going to turn out the way that you want it to. Wait till the next one before you do that. I think you'll be all right. So we're looking at this June 10th eclipse, and we've let go of some of the old belief systems. Hopefully we've composted old stories and narratives and old attachments and old goals, potentially, that weren't serving us anymore. And now we are bringing in, since this is a new moon, the energy of beginning, and it's conjoining the north node, which is an energy of increase. And Gandalf has some thoughts on this, so he's contributing in the background. This is a really a beginning moment. This is where energy is coming in, and the energy that's going to be coming in is one of questions and not necessarily answers. We composted some old answers, and we are getting curious again. So curiosity is something that's coming in. Integrity is important with this eclipse, because the north node is on 10 degrees of Gemini, which is conjoined a fixed star called Aldebaran. And Aldebaran was the eye of the bull, and it had some associations with the myth of Ahura Mazda, which was kind of a military leader in mythology that really he had to do things a certain way, or there would be great punishment. So there's associations with that fixed star of, you have to be in alignment with your integrity and keep things above board, or the repercussions will be swift. Also, this is in the second decan of Gemini. So Gemini II, I'm going to roll through some details here, CV, and then we'll kind of break it down. Okay.
Yeah.
In Gemini II, we have the face rulers are Mars and Venus, which are opposites basically in traditional astrology, where we are trying to think about the balancing out the masculine and the feminine, the kind of the assertive energy versus the receptive energy. This eclipse is going to be in the terms of Mars from 17 to 24 degrees, and it will be co-present with its host, Mercury, which is retrograde, and will also be Cazimi over the course of the day. So that's huge. Austin Coppock calls this decan the hermaphrodite, and it has some associations with the story of Cybele, okay, which is the daimon for this particular decan. And Cybele was a deity that was born with both sex organs, was born with male and female sex organs, and eventually the gods were intimidated by their power and severed one of like the phallus, and it fell to the earth, and from it grew a tree. And a passing youth ate an almond from that tree and took in the essence of Cybele's lost other half. And then there was this pursuit, and we believe the youth's name was Addis. And there was this story of Cybele pursuing her lost other half. So there's really a story of trying to unify what we've these disparate opposites that we feel like we may have been cut off from. So there's we have this card, the Nine of Swords, associated with this Deccan II, and the Nine of Swords shows somebody awake at night. I'll stop my share for just a second to show people this. Oops. So we've got this card here, where it's kind of the nightmare card, where we're having difficulty with all these different thoughts and options. We had this paralysis in the first decan of Gemini, with everybody kind of like saying, oh, here's this pathway and this pathway, and we feel bound by all those choices. And now we're trying to say, what stays, what goes, how do we reconcile these opposites? Whereas eventually we're going to get to that Ten of Swords energy, where we are having to make a choice. And the Cazimi is actually in the third decan, which I thought was really fascinating. So here's the three decans of Gemini: the paralysis from explosion of options and awareness of duality, the difficulty trying to reconcile them, and then eventually a choice that needs to be made so that we can breathe life into something, and let go of that which we can no longer support. Okay. And that comes into play with the story of Castor and Pollux, the two twins. One was mortal and one was immortal, as far as Pollux had to give up some of his immortality so that Castor could live again, because they were, they didn't want to be apart. So that's kind of like the big details I see here: reconciling opposites, contradictory needs that we're trying to work through. But the main thing, I think, is curiosity and ambiguity, and realizing that we don't necessarily have to have it all figured out right away, I think, is the first part of it. What are some of your thoughts, CV?
Well, when you were going through that and we were bringing the tarot into it, I had this just like, vision that thinking about a lot of in general, when I think of eclipses, I think of them as just very like pregnant, like open times to just observe, watch, be mindful of what we do, knowing that we're potentially creating large ripples. But thinking about that second decan of Gemini, that like really it's like maybe part of our this eclipse experience is really juggling two things. Where do I want to go? What is it? Like these, like you said, these questions all coming to the fore. And I love this idea that, right, like just as we're at the peak of these questions, Mercury, right, takes a step back into the sun, into that third decan, and it was like, that's it. That twin dies, that twin lives. This is the choice. And so really, really being mindful in this Cazimi, maybe you're not going to have answers, but maybe there's one hidden that you can you'll be able to fully flesh out in the next few months.
Yeah, I'm feeling that statement really, really intensely. I think that you're hitting the nail on the head, that once we get to that Cazimi moment, it's going to be pretty clear as to which path is either sustainable or unsustainable. We can't keep all the plates spinning in the air. I think this is the thing with Gemini that people fail to recognize, is that the exploration has a purpose. The exploration is eventually so that a choice can be made, and that we can infuse our intellect and our ideas into a physical body to manifest into form, which is what Cancer is about. What are we going to nurture? How are we going to nurture that idea? How are we going to nurture one of the choices, right? I think that this is just a personal aside with that. Recently, I've been reviewing Mercury retrograde, some old videos that I had on my phone and on my external hard drive, because I ran out of space on my phone. And so my phone was like, let go of something. I can't breathe anymore.
Oh my God, it happened during the conference.
Yeah. And I had to start taking pictures with a different thing and whatever. But I had over 900 swimming videos on there, which was of my daughter's swim meets and her practices. And what I would do is I would videotape her practice, and then we would review some of her the way that her technique together and things like that, give her feedback. And you know how extra I am with details. So like, so I got rid of that. But one of the other things that was happening is a lot of my old music videos started coming up, like concerts and that I had performed in a few years ago before I started really transitioning more to astrology. And it really put me in that Gemini 9 of Swords sort of mindset where I was like, man, I really love doing this art. Which thing am I going to breathe energy into? Because I've got a lot of stuff coming up with astrology, but I'm also sort of missing the music. And it's that kind of like balancing act. And my thought is that something will have to be let go of, but it doesn't mean that we can never do something, right? I think what Austin Coppock used to say is he has a Gemini moon, right? And I believe he tells the story that his mom used to say, it's not that you have to be one thing or only do one thing, but you have to choose. Sorry, my cats. He just ate a piece of my. Sorry. I may have to give him the boot in a second. He's the dragon. He's the hungry dragon right now.
Yes, he's just eating.
Usually I don't keep this door open, but it's so darn hot in here. I need to get a fan from the air conditioned room in the other room. But anyway, the story that Austin says is that his mom told him that he doesn't necessarily have to let go of that other path permanently, but he should be present and fully present in what he's doing when he's doing it. And that really resonates with me. And I think that that's been something that I've been doing with my astrology for the last few years, is I've made a commitment to learn this new traditional path. And I really needed to just dive into it completely without having to feel I was being pulled in a separate direction, like with my art and with my music. And now I feel like I've gotten to a point, not that I know everything, I definitely don't. There's always things to learn, as Demetra has proven. Yeah. But I think I'm comfortable to a point where I may be able to like start re-engaging a little bit with artistic things or with music or things like that. Do you have thoughts on that?
Absolutely. It's something I think about a lot. And I think maybe as being someone who, well, I'm just sort of multidisciplinary. So that really speaks to me. I do have a Gemini moon. And so I'm going to start with the universal first. One, I think the important thing about astrology, I mean, there are people like Chris Brennan, who, God bless, like, it's like he has like, I don't know, the like astro equivalent in a PhD of like astrology. I mean, he's basically a historian, right? So that's sort of the lens through which he views astrology. But I think the beautiful thing about I said and, because it's not a but. The beautiful thing about astrology is that you really need another discipline to work it through. Why am I blanking on his name? God bless, I love him. And he's Chris. I want to refer to him as Chris Brennan. You broke up a fight between them.
Oh, Glenn Perry?
No, at the.
Oh, no, I think I'm. Wade Caves.
Okay, Wade Caves. He's the one who says you need to have something else to bring to your astrology.
I'm gonna get in so much trouble for this one. But,
I'm moving on. Wade Caves. How great Wade Caves is.
How many fights did I break up at the United Astrology Conference?
I wasn't there. I don't know. Maybe none. At any rate, he always says you have to bring something else to your astrology, which is the point I was getting at. Remember his name. And so think about it, like, I don't know, for me, right, like I've kind of taken the decision, despite the fact that I was in a 17-hour lecture, that like, okay, I've studied astrology intensely for 3 years. It's obviously what I'm doing. But like my focus in my classes now for the next year are going to be more writing intensive, because I personally want to grow as a writer, because that's something I work in with my writing, my astrology. And so I think for you, it's like, yeah, like that idea of like, okay, I have my astrology foundation. Now what can what other thing do I need to work on building to add it to? Because ultimately what we're all building is I think a multi-layered, multidisciplinary practice for most of us. Again, if you're in astrology, there's always something you're adding to it, whether it's like you're doing like psychoanalytic stuff, or you're like writing, or you're bringing it in through your music, or you're a historian or whatever. So
Yeah, totally. And I was having a nice conversation with Deborah about this the other day, where we were talking about what we bring to our astrology. And even if you're in the beginning stages of learning the system, you bring that life experience to the table. And it's not just about the symbols, because we can study the symbols and we can get like you said, the foundation. I like that you're talking about, like, Chris has his PhD, and I feel like what I was doing over the last 4 years was just getting my astrology master's degree, because I had been, I would say I had the equivalent of a bachelor's in my 15 years of intense casual interest, although I don't do anything casually. So like, but it was focused, right? It was focused. But what I've been talking to with newer students of astrology is that my experience as a music teacher, as a musician, recognizing patterns, my time in front of classrooms teaching songwriting,
yeah.
all contribute to my astrological worldview, to my skill set. And the same is true for all of you out there who are thinking about, well, what do I have to offer if there's a Chris Brennan out in the world? Well, your unique experience, because there is that third thing that is created, which is the oracular space. There are the symbols, there is the client, and there's the astrologer, and then there's the oracular space that you're tapping into. And you're bringing your life experiences in, you're bringing your viewpoint of what the symbols mean, and then you're creating that third thing. And I think that's something that's so important to recognize, because I go back to Jeffrey Cornelius, who I, really changed, another really landmark author, The Moment of Astrology, right? Which, just talking about how astrologers that have even less experience were hitting the mark almost as much as the ones that had more experience, just because, they were tapping into something. And I think that the other thing I've talked about with people is what you get when you increase your study and your understanding is not just always accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
It's an ability to communicate your insights in a more articulate way that people can receive your message. So
Mm-hmm.
you're just learning communication skills, I think, by learning these different symbols, learning fixed stars, learning the decans. We could get something right in saying this is a new moon solar eclipse in Gemini, and we could say something on that level that could have oracular meaning for somebody. But we start to get into the nuance, and we start to break it down in more complex language that might reach somebody on a different level. It's like the fluency, right, of delivering the oracular message. So
I really like that. It's that idea of the study is so that you can articulate the knowledge. Because really, if you think about it, like when I think about the houses themselves, I think it's like 1 through 12. You're literally like the breadth of human experience. So like we all have something we can plug into that, but it's the language that really brings it to life.
definitely. And I think that that's a important theme for this eclipse in particular, is how do you deliver Hermes, Mercury,
Mm-hmm.
a message of truth? Because Hermes is going between worlds. He was the border crosser.
Yeah.
So right now he is going into, metaphorically, the underworld, and he is unearthing things from the hidden places and bringing them to the light at that Kazemi. He's unearthing like the core essence of soul. And how is he going to deliver that? And how are you going to deliver that truth in a way that somebody is able to receive it? And same thing when Hermes is going and doing the superior conjunction, when it's direct,
Yeah.
right? Maybe he's visiting Olympus and he's visiting the realm of the gods, and you're bringing that thing down to the earth, that wisdom, that Olympian wisdom, to the physical plane. Whereas we're unearthing things with this type of conjunction, the inferior conjunction.
Mm.
I like that. I like that kind of. That's something that Gary Caton really like turned me on to, as far as the different superior versus inferior conjunction. I'll just demonstrate what I'm talking about here. So when Mercury is going retrograde and making a conjunction with the sun, that's called the inferior conjunction. Okay. And it doesn't mean it's any better or worse. It just means that it's you know, coming from behind rather than above. When Mercury is making a conjunction direct, so this is the retrograde one, here's the direct one, that's the superior conjunction. And I've been kind of talking with Gary Caton about the superior conjunction might be about Hermes visiting the Olympian realms, or the realms of the gods, and bringing something back from maybe from his morning star greatest elongation type of thing as well. And we're getting kind of technical here, um but anyway, I just think that over the course of the next few days, pay attention to what is brought up from the depths, and pay attention to those realizations and those thoughts, and think about how you are going to bring that message to your audience, or to however it wants to be manifested. And you're gonna have to be flexible. Like, that's what Mercury or Hermes and Gemini require: flexibility. You can't just power through in the way that you've always done something, or you will start to make mistakes and get fixated on dogma versus truth. Like, that's the difference that we're seeing here. Dogma is when we're saying it has to be this way because it's always been this way, and we're getting attached to form rather than essence. And I think that's the key right there, is how can you bring the essence to light versus getting attached to the form or the methodology.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions in the chat here?
I
I'm
don't know.
seeing some nice comments here. One more thing that I want to do in our time today, CV, if you've got a few more minutes to spare, is I like to do a I-Ching reading for the whatever type of astrology we're experiencing. And I did one today for the eclipse, and what type of experience and what type of essence we may expect with this one. And I'm drawing this on the screen here, and I'm drawing the hexagram number 61, which is called Inner Truth. And it's moving towards hexagram 17, which translates to adapting, following. so here we have 61. And other words for this hexagram: inner truth, inner sincerity, confidence, trustworthiness, integrity, conformity between the outside and the inside. This is another thing that I was talking about with another client, which was a way that I had described integrity really resonated with them. And it is the unity between the inner vision and the external expression. So we're trying to come into alignment with the inner vision that is coming up probably through Jupiter and Pisces. And how are we going to be expressing that in the world that is a reflection of who we really are, right? Rather than like, feeling one thing but saying another, which is a danger with Hermes type stuff and Gemini stuff, because the dark side of this is trying to tell people what we think that they want to hear rather than what our actual truth is. Carly says one interesting Gemini eclipse thing is Bitcoin is up 15%. Well, I didn't know that. So we've been riding the cryptocurrency roller coaster lately, haven't we? I don't have a lot of experience with cryptocurrency. I don't actually own any. I'm very risk averse, so I'm just kind of like, I don't know what to do about that. But yeah, maybe CV has more thoughts on that. But
That's a separate topic. I'm fascinated just by the idea of an electric currency, but anyway,
yeah. So back to this reading.
Yeah.
We have 3 changing lines, and one of them is line number. Actually, did I write all the changing lines down? Where are they? Yeah, I guess I didn't write them all down. Line 2, line 4, and line 6. There it is. Okay. Line 2 says, inner sincerity brings response from those with a like mind. Share your joy with them. So this is about being genuine and sincere to invite a response and create unity. It specifically said to avoid shallowness. Line 4 says, a crane calling out in the shade. Its young answers it. I have a fine goblet, and excuse me, I will share it with you. Um, so this is really about being able to share your wisdom, being able to communicate with people, not hoarding your resources or your wisdom, sharing what your truths are. That was actually, excuse me, that was the quote from line 2. Okay, the crane calling out in the shade that talks about finding those with a like mind and sharing your joy with them and using your sincerity to create unity. Line number 4 says the moon is nearly full. A paired team of horses, one abandons its mate, no blame. So I love that there's these kind of like really like, esoteric quotes that we have to like really unearth meaning from the I-Ching. But this one, it was talking about there's time for change, so it's time to go your own way. Higher goals and ideals are calling. It's important to follow the path of integrity. And maybe through going your own way, you have to release some other pathway, right? A paired team of horses, one abandons its mate. Okay, this could be maybe one of the twins has to die, right? See, it's all tying in, isn't it?
And I was thinking too, right? Like when you're talking about this, right? We have to think the South Node is still in Sagittarius, and I'm thinking like horses, Sagittarius, but then also this idea of like when we say like we're letting go. I think also I think some of the symbolism from South Node can be like releasing your wisdom by sharing it with others. Maybe a time to teach, right?
Yeah,
That's a,
disseminating.
that's disseminating that Sagittarius
Yeah.
South Node fits into this as well.
Totally. And enthusiasm is associated with Sagittarius too, saying, I've believed this, I'm going to share my passion with others. So
Mhm.
that definitely is part of the equation. The last line, number 6, says a soaring sound rises into the sky. Perseverance brings misfortune. So we have a little bit of a conflicting message here with the last line, which talked about avoiding empty words and lofty rhetoric. Okay, so words are not the same as truth. They were really speaking to not making promises that you can't keep, right? If you become ambitious, that it requires devotion, and that's not necessarily Hermes' strength. Is not necessarily their strength of consistency, of like seeing things through to the very end. So I think it's really important that the warning here is that, if you are wanting to share your wisdom, share a new project, start something new, what actions are you going to take in addition to the ideas that have come up? It's easy to talk about what you want to do, but you have to walk your talk eventually. So I think that that's a part of the equation. 17 is the following: allegiance, loyalty, hunting, pursuits, adaptability, being adaptable. Um, so I just think that we have to maintain our flexibility. I think that we have to be devoted to whatever twin we choose to breathe life into without constantly vacillating and changing our minds. I think that, again, the way that you can find relief is releasing the twin doesn't always mean it's permanent. It's just about being present and about putting your energy into the present moment instead of like, splitting your energy in multiple directions so that what you're doing is just never, um, I don't know, quality, right? So where everything is a compromise. That's one of the dangers of this. What do you think, CB? Anything that brought to mind?
Yeah, will you repeat the line where it said perseverance will what?
Yeah, I'll stop my share here. It says, uh, a soaring sound rises into the sky. Perseverance brings misfortune.
That's interesting. Like it it made me think of this, right? Like during eclipse time, I was thinking about Mercury delivering this message, but also this sort of very root concept that we can't control eclipses, right?
Yeah.
Like it's important to remember that whatever we're being shown right now to like be very real about what's being shown to us and what like it's a to quote you, right? Like in a sense this is a time when we're getting our cosmic marching orders, and that means sometimes letting go of what we think we should be doing to figure out what the universe wants us to be doing. And so this idea that if like, fine, if you go through right now and charge your crystals and persevere and make, say, tell the universe, I want this, which so much of New Age, right? I'm going to manifest this, this, and this. Like that can actually bring you misfortune.
Sure. Well, and also one thing that we didn't really even touch on, I'm going to go back to the chart for just 1 second here. Mercury's in a pretty tight square with Neptune, and what we think we want might not actually be the reality that we're seeing. So there is a potential for, our thoughts being a little bit colored by this illusion that may not be real. And also we have Jupiter making an overcoming square, which generally is positive, but it could be we are feeling a little bit too ambitious too. I think that this could be where we're trying to manifest a little bit too much. And part of integrity also, okay, we have Saturn also in a trine with this eclipse. So stay within your skill set, within your limits. Don't try to do too much. Don't get blinded by fancy, flashing lights. Try to maintain your sense of groundedness. Doesn't mean you can't go for it. It just, part of integrity also means that not going beyond what you are capable of, right? A lot of the times we get out of integrity because we promise more than we can deliver. And we have to be real careful that we're not going to be over promising in this period of time, because Gemini is a sanguine air sign. It's enthusiastic about its ideas. It says, this is a great idea, and so is this, and you're great. It's similar to Leo on that level, right? But it we can get a little bit overly enthusiastic sometimes. And I think that it's important. Yeah, stay in your lane, Lisa says. Stay in your lane. And we are getting, one final thought. As we move forward here, Mars is going to leave Cancer, thank goodness. That'll be a relief to me, although it'll be moving into our first houses. Yay. Out of the frying pan into the fire, right?
The hot Mars.
Right. So, but I think that we will be ready to take some action, and we may be feeling a little bit spicy and impulsive. So I think it's important to recognize that you're going to want to move and get moving, with Mars, then witnessing those eclipse planets. So just, this is always good advice. Take a deep breath. You don't have to do it all at once. Eclipses are not just new moons, but they are like metacycles. They're 6-month cycles. They're 18-year cycles. And whatever is unfolding now is going to have, butterfly effect ripples for the story of your life. And I think that if you allow it to unfold, like you said, like come into alignment with that wild card type of shakeup, you're not going to burn yourself out trying to do it all, at once, right? Trying to do everything in the, oh, I have to do everything right now. And then you'll come out of alignment with your integrity and things will fall apart. So take your time. It'll be all right. Like, right. It's my mom voice.
No, I think that's like, yeah, I think that's just really beautiful advice, especially where, this eclipse season that has been Mercury driven.
Right. And be okay with ambiguity. That's the other thing. Be okay with not having all the answers and with having more questions than answers right now. That's really how to lean into Mercury. When we say the chart is the problem and the solution, Mercury says, let's question things. Let's get curious. Let's ask the good questions without making declarative statements. So I don't think that you have to make a declarative statement on who you are, what you're doing, what it is that you're actually doing. It'll unfold over time if you start asking the proper questions. And like you said, with that Kazemi moment, some of the things will start to become clear, I think, over time.
And just to sort of finish with that, like just because you get to the point where you figure out which twin must die, like realize that opens a whole other set of questions. Well, now what's the remaining twin going to do?
Yeah.
Didn't figure that one out yet.
Totally. Some answers just beget more questions, don't they? That's my life. One book will lead to 10 more books, So All right. Well, thank you so much, CV, for joining me today. It is always a pleasure. CV, tell me, where can we find you, and what are some of the things that you are working on at the moment?
Well, I am CV Henriette, artofthezodiac.co. Um, I You can visit my website. I do write a blog for Supernatural Lingerie. I wrote something on the nodes. I think I put that in the chat.
And
So
I shared that in the YouTube chat too.
yeah, check that out. Let me see. And then I'm doing a lunar salon tonight. It's open. And if you're an astrologer out there, I also host. I'm about to relaunch it on the Kazemi, an astrology writers workshop.
Nice.
So check that out if you're interested in workshopping your astrological writings. Get at me. Let's be friends on Instagram. I'm so thankful to Spencer, who, by the way, is one of my favorite astrologers. A little for you, and someone who I go to when I have need advice about charts. So that's my testimony to you as an astrologer. You're an amazing in consultations and beyond.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And the feelings mutual, CV. I really appreciate um, your intuition. I keep telling you that with your, I know you got that Mercury that's all funky, but somehow you're able to kind of contextualize things in a way that my little Virgo brain sometimes can't see the bigger picture. So it's thank you for that as well. And I have a lot of respect for the work that you do as well and your wisdom. So yeah, check out CV at Art of the Zodiac. She has an apothecary line. She's doing a lot of great community building and interviews people, and really shines a spotlight. And I think that one of CV's great skills is she allows people to be great. You know, she's able to, you get that beautiful Venus in Taurus, and you're able to kind of like, you know, prop people up. And I always feel better after our talks and stuff. So thank you for that. If you want to support the work that I do here, the first thing that you can do is hit that like button on Spencer Michaud Astrology. And you could share it with your friends, leave me a comment, even if you weren't able to catch it live on the replays, leave me a comment, subscribe to the channel. If you want to make a material donation to the work that I do, you can make a donation at buymeacoffee.com. That is always appreciated. It gives me the time to do the research that I do and to create the content that I do. And I'm so thankful for all of you that have joined us in the chat today. We're getting some hearts, we're getting some thank yous, and I appreciate all of you being here today. And I hope to continue to create just an outlet for people to be able to communicate and to, you know, I don't know, express ourselves astrologically and create more community. I think that's my 11th house intention with the eclipse happening there. So appreciate all of you. Thanks for being here. And thank you, CV, so much for your time today.
Thank you. Lovely.
All right. Take care, everyone.